All right, welcome back to the Studio 2121 podcast. I'm back with Alison Browning again. She's the Division Director of our Youth Services program here at Westbrook Health Services. Alison, how are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you today?
Fantastic. I think this may be the last podcast that I do with Westbrook, so I'm excited to have you as my final guest.
Thank you.
So I'll get started. Today we wanted to discuss evidence-based practices, and we'll get into a bit more about what that means. But first I wanted to ask, with the school year going back, how is everything going with the Youth Services Division?
We are popping, and it's really exciting because we are finding ourselves in schools that we haven't been in before, or it's been in a while since we've been in. We are finding that we get to be helpful in ways that we've always wanted to be, but haven't had the opportunity to be in recent years. So being able to help our communities is really, really awesome. And when our schools are happening, that's really when we're really busy. So it's been a very exciting first few weeks of school.
Well, I hope it's going well, and I'm excited that you get to speak with new students and kind of expand our reach and our ability to help new people.
Absolutely.
So today we want to sit down and talk about evidence-based practices. And this is a term you might hear thrown around a lot in psychology or sociology even. Can you give me your working definition and maybe break it down a bit for our viewers who might not be familiar?
Absolutely. And I really love that that's what we're talking about today, because I use the word evidence-based practice in almost every single meeting I have. And the thing about it is it's one of those words that we use all the time and we know what it means, but the people that we're really participating in evidence-based practices with don't understand why we choose these and these only. And evidence-based practices, the best part about evidence-based practices is they have an intended outcome. So they have been researched. They have been done over and over and over again. So at the end of it, we kind of have a big idea of what's going to happen with this client. Now, for something to be defined as evidence-based, that means the theoretical knowledge going into it and the theoretical practices have been studied and reviewed and looked at, but also everything going in it is evidence-based, peer-reviewed, and that intended outcome is what we really are looking for. It's kind of that trifecta. And when something has all three of those things, we get to call it an evidence-based program.
I like this approach because it reminds me a lot of just scientific inquiry in general, right?
Absolutely.
We're using that same ethos where I think when we're talking about people, there's such variability and you know, we have a lot of armchair experts who might have an idea of what they would want to happen in the situation. But as clinicians and people really just trying to be as effective as possible, I think it's good to cut through any static or noise about what might be effective and say, well, we have done this enough that we have data and we can tell you with more certainty what's going to be effective.
Exactly. And it's that science piece of psychology really shining through that we get with our evidence-based practices. And it's really nice that you brought up school because that's where we do most of our evidence-based practices. We have some really cool, different, for all ages, evidence-based that we get to come in and we get to teach. And we get to either promote or prevent or even have some treatment models available. And the thing about it is it's that intended outcome. Like, we know, and what's really cool is we also do pre- and post-test ourselves. So we know that evidence-based practice will give us a positive outcome, but then when we do that pre- and post-test that's required by almost all evidence-based practices, we get to see that intended outcome. And on top of that is we send a lot of that data back to the manufacturer, the creator of the evidence-based program, and then they're updated and altered so that that outcome that we're looking for in our kids or our adults, but whoever we're using it for, we're going to get every time. And you're right, there's a lot of pieces, and the clinician comes into that, and that's why training is so important. And when it comes to using evidence-based practices, we really train our staff to the best of our ability. So when they go into the schools and they work with our kids, again, that intended outcome is what we're getting.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking about how this would play out. Corporal punishment or physical punishment used to be really common in the school system, and I'm guessing after a lot of data, maybe we found that there's better ways for certain individuals than just going for physical retribution. But that was sort of, the common knowledge at the time. That was sort of recommended and what was put forth. But when you have recorded good quality data, I'm sure that you can find other ways around it that are probably a bit more effective. Is there another example you might give of evidence-based practices in some of the programs that we use here?
Absolutely. And speaking of the corporal punishment and even the way corporal punishment was done in schools, we use an evidence-based practice, actually 2 or 3, but together when kids get in trouble for vaping. So middle schoolers in Wood County, if they are caught with a vape or they get in trouble with vaping in school, they have to go to a 1-day nicotine cessation course. And that is helped ran by Westbrook over at the Summit Center. And we use ripple effects, which is one of our favorite evidence-based practices, as well as, I think it's Catch My Breath, to help these kids learn and understand why vaping is not healthy and why vaping is not good for us. But also, with that evidence-based practice, we ask the kid why they're doing it in the first place. And ripple effects is the reason it's one of my favorites for this is, let's say the kid's like, Allison, I'm really struggling with anxiety and I just want to fit in and everybody else is doing it. There's a ripple effects for that. And we can go through the catalog and go, okay, this one right here would be very helpful for this particular student. And they'll go through that. And that's where the schools even have recognized the importance of teaching and learning versus just punishing. And those evidence-based practices are used for that very often.
And it sounds like, too, you have this ability to provide that holistic approach that Westbrook is so favored, right? Like,
yes.
It's individualized care and holistic and backed by science, right? Like, where you're not pulling something out of a hat. You're kind of reaching into deep experience and applying that in the schools. And I think that's really admirable.
I think we're lucky to be West Virginians because we have the support of the state in using evidence-based practices. The Behavior Health Bureau created a clearinghouse, and they partnered with Marshall and WVU to go through and look at different programs, such as Ripple Effects or I Am Little Red is one of them. In these programs, we had peer reviews, we had clinicians, we had people from all over, West Virginians, going through these evidence-based practices to determine if they had what we needed to be evidence-based. And we have a website and an entire, just with its own search engine. You can put in there, Catch My Breath, and see if it's evidence-based. And it is, and that's one of the ones that we use. And you can submit a program for review. Let's say there's one out there that I think might be really, really good, but it's not evidence-based yet. I can submit that for review at the clearinghouse, and it can get put on the list, or they can come back to me and say, you know what, Allison, that's not evidence-based, but it's evidence-informed. Maybe in a few more years it could be evidence-based. They put a lot of time and research into these programs.
Do you think they're providing sort of a granular feedback in that process as well, to not only say it's not evidence-based yet, but it is informed? Here are a couple of markers or a couple of new solutions to some of the problems that the program faces to get that status as well?
No, I'm not sure if the state clearinghouse does, but on the national level, that absolutely happens because a lot of people, when they create a program, they want it to be evidence-based. So they will run it through different type of trials and really scientific measures. It is sometimes done in a very closed location or in an open location, and as a result is where they get their evidence. And I know at a national level when they do things like that, they get that kind of feedback, but I'm not sure about the state.
I do think it's so interesting you pointed out that West Virginia, which faces so many, issues with stigma, but also just there's a lack of resources in certain communities, right? The more rural we get, the more isolated we get, the harder it is to really seek help and services at the social level. And I think it's really remarkable that West Virginia is taking a forward-thinking approach to behavioral health. Do you think there's any history or what informs that? Like, how did we get to this point where West Virginia is really showing people how it's done?
I think we're sick of seeing people sick. The opioid epidemic, and we know that generally speaking, addiction comes with mental health. And I think because it's hit our state so hard, we're just sick of people being sick, and we want to be helpful. I think the judgment and the stigma, why it's still there, absolutely. In a big way, I think that disease model that is addiction is being understood on levels that I don't think it was before. And I really think that's changing. But I really think it's people helping people. A lot of evidence-based practices, you don't have to be a clinician to do. You just need to be well-trained. So your neighbor can be trained in catch my breath, or we do safe dates here, those kind of things. You can get trained in that and help your neighbor. Go to the community center in your local community and teach this class to be able to help people. And we're seeing more of that happen. I really think it's people are deciding, I'm sick of seeing it like this, and I want change, and I'm going to be a part of change.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Safe Talk has been so successful here at Westbrook. It was very impactful on me. Jason does a really great job. And I think with your practices and what Jason does, I love it because it's sort of a model that encourages the community to get involved rather than sort of sit back and wait for experts to come in and magically fix it by means that no one can understand. It's more just, everyone get involved, all hands on deck. It takes a village kind of approach to behavioral health.
Yes, I love, love, love it. And in big ways, that's where Westbrook is moving. We're moving to the community. We're moving to let us teach you and let's do it together. I don't want to do it for you. I don't want you to watch. I want you to be hand in hand with me and let's do it together. And as we get more into the community and as we are doing these events and stuff like that, it's really awesome to see everybody come together and work together. You don't hear a lot of that's not my job. You hear a lot of how can I help? And I think that's the thing from Appalachia we get that other places just don't understand, is our neighbors will always give us a cup of sugar. They'll always help out. And I think we're really seeing that right now as our communities come together to help one another.
It's a great characteristic of the region. One of the things that I think is so cool is that you do get to travel around, learn of new programs, meet new people in the field, and sort of share experiences and data. Do you see a trend happening where people are more interested in these evidence-based practices and sort of taking notice that West Virginia is taking strides in this field?
People are absolutely taking notice. We are having way more schools and communities come to us and say, what is there? What can we do? And when we start talking about evidence-based practices, again, that intended positive outcome, I know that it's wonderful because we know it's good, but that's a selling point for people. They're like, so we already know it's successful? I don't have to try it 3 or 4 times and just cross my fingers and hope? I'm like, yeah, we know it's successful. And when people know that success can come out of it, they're willing to try harder. It seems like, because, again, they just are sick of people being sick and want to be helpful. So knowing that help can come from it before they even try, I think that is a really big selling point.
And so we're always hiring new people for these roles, and people come from a variety of backgrounds. Is this discussed much at the college level, or what trainings or preparation could someone take on if they were wanting to take a more hands-on role in doing this in the community and maybe working for Westbrook one day?
One of the things that a community member could do is they could reach out, because we will go into schools, daycares, churches. Even if a community wanted us to come and train them so they could do something there for their community, we do that. And if it was wanting to work for Westbrook one day, what's really cool is we have so many opportunities and so many different things for people to be passionate and grow. For an example, our program director in prevention the other day was like, you know what, I'm going to go do Save a Life Day in this county because our prevention coordinator is really passionate about threat assessment and violence, and we have an opportunity to go to a community and help them. So she traded him roles so he could do the thing he's passionate about. And you find that at Westbrook. You find that a lot. And he's got a bunch of EBPs we're going to take and show off and ask how we can be helpful. And that's the piece, is if you're really wanting to do something like this, find what you like, because it's easier to do it. I can tell you it doesn't feel like I work a lot anymore, even though I come to work every day, and that's because I like what I'm doing. So when it's an evidence-based practice and you're going in to help your community, if it's something that you really like doing and you really like being a part of, that right there is where you should start.
Yeah, and it seems like this programming is great at decoding and demystifying some things that people might feel. What would you say to any community leader, say a principal or a church leader, someone who's in a position of authority that might be on the fence about something like this, being that we're dealing with variability in human populations? If you could just give one message, what would that be? Ask
questions. Don't hold back. There's no such thing as a stupid or silly question. Explore all avenues, even if it's just a research. If you put West Virginia Evidence-Based Clearinghouse in a Google search, you'll find it. And in that website, there is a little video that explains evidence-based practices, how the ones on that list got picked, and what that means. But it also has some contact information that goes straight to our state, and they will answer any questions. I've had to already contact one of the manufacturers of our EBPs asking if we could tweak something a little, and how we could change something to fit our community because it was so rural. And they're like, oh, that absolutely makes sense. Go ahead, and this is why. And the science of why I can change it is what they gave me. And it's science-based each time. So again, it's coming back to ask questions. Don't hesitate. And for us, don't mind if you tell me no. If you're like, you don't have what we want right now, cool beans. The fact that it's going to be in your head thinking about it later, maybe for somebody else, that's all that matters to me. So ask questions.
I think that's so important. It's ask questions and keep trying, right? Like having that hope and that desire to keep going.
Absolutely.
With things like violence or, systemic drug use or misuse, it does sometimes seem like an overwhelming thing to tackle. But even just trying something is getting more data. It contributes to the effort, successful or through failure. We learn more about what was able to work and what doesn't. And I would just hope that people that are in a situation where they deal with these things do not surrender to apathy, right? And still take it on like we're going to figure this out. And it could take a whole community, but that's what we've got,
Yep. I always say stay optimistic. No matter what, even if what you want to happen isn't, you can't quite see it, I guarantee you there's growth and positivity in whatever it is that you did that day. So always stay optimistic.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, Alison, thank you so much for sitting down with me again. It's been a pleasure. And thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.
Awesome. Thank you, Chase.